All right. Okay. Well, so I want to start with something, question or sharing, testimony, or feel free. Someone's trying to ring rather than. Oof. Oh, yeah, never mind. Okay. So, who'd like to start?
Okay. That's I have been mildly rebuked by the Lord.
Yeah.
It's been almost I think next month will be almost 2 years under your mentorship since we did the first my journey to see video. And at this stage, I actually should be mentoring other people and setting up cities of refuge, and instead of struggling myself. So it's not frustration; it's just I expect it to be further along. So I have to up my game a bit. If we're going to bring in a billion soul harvest, we simply haven't got the time to hang around.
So, yep. So have you got a particular question on that? I didn't quite catch the question on it.
No, that's just as I'm trying to explain to people how to use their imagination, and people are struggling to start off by using your imagination for encounters. Simply imagine stepping into Jesus and then stepping up.
Yeah. So, right. This is like I'm being slightly distracted here with all the other calls that people are trying to call rather than answer the call, which is why you get all the background noise and stuff. So, yeah. I mean, if you're sort of saying in terms of to mentor others, you really only have to be on the same journey to encourage people to pursue. I mean, none of us are experts. We're all learning. We may just be at slightly different stages on our journey. So I can encourage anybody, wherever I am on my journey, to pursue. And we've actually got people who are mentoring people in the beta group, who actually some of the beta group people are seem to be further on their journey than the people who are mentoring them. But it doesn't matter. It actually just facilitates communication and sharing and opportunity of sharing and bouncing things, and it's really just to help facilitate people having an opportunity to talk with others of like mind. You know, I had a conversation today with someone who's in the UK, and there are very few people that they can talk to. Someone I know from years back, and they were just saying, you know, there's no one else around here that is seemingly pursuing these things, and I don't know anybody. You know, so it can be difficult, and to have an environment where people feel safe to ask questions or to just share and to ask for feedback, I think is the key to these things. And when it comes to, you know, activating the imagination and those things, I think people get stuck in that they're trying to use their imagination to create an encounter, rather than using your imagination as a doorway to go into an encounter and then having the experience. You know, I don't try and make up the experience. I use my imagination as a doorway to encounter it, and then it happens. And whether that's visual or auditory or sensing or perception or knowing, it doesn't really matter too much, so long as I'm having some sort of interaction with God, which is giving me a perception and understanding and revelation that I didn't have before. So don't be concerned about, well, I can't see everything, you know, like Ian Clayton, who describes, you know, all these realms of heaven. But actually, if you listen to Ian, he doesn't really describe that much at all. You know, he never describes actually, is he seeing this in a way that is very descriptive, because I don't think he wants to get people to try and copy his experiences or trying to picture what he's picturing. So it's really using your imagination. It's a little bit like your imagination, a friend of mine says, is like a starter motor of a car. You use it to turn the engine over, but when the engine fires, the engine runs on its own. So we can use a doorway picture or use our imagination to open up a first love gate, or to step up on Jacob's ladder, or the many different ways people use, just to actually activate the by faith I am looking to step into this. Then what happens happens. You don't have to strive for what happens. And if you then, well, nothing seemed to happen, well, by faith, actually accept that your spirit has engaged, because God always rewards those who come to him in faith. And the more we engage, the easier it becomes just to understand what we've experienced and what we've received. So, you are totally capable of mentoring others and helping, I'm sure. We're always looking out for more mentors, because actually some people in the UK have had to mentor people over in the US because we couldn't find mentors in their own area. Well, which is okay, but ideally we can try and find people to help in our own areas. But it's a journey that we're all on, and we all need just to encourage each other to enjoy the journey, and not to get stressed about it or striving for it, but to relax and enjoy God's presence. And that will bring more fruitfulness than trying hard to make it happen. I'm not saying we shouldn't be perseverant or diligent, but not strive to see when we probably are already perceiving. We've just tuned that out because we want to see. If God's trying to speak to you and you want him to show you something, you can miss what he's saying because he's not saying it in the way that you want him to. And we must really find what works for us. And yes, we can practice developing all the other senses, and but I still default to the main things for me, which isn't visual, because I want to do most of the things I do with my eyes open. I want to engage the realm of the spirit. I want to be doing things here while my spirit is in heaven. Well, I can't do that if I'm closing my eyes, meditating, and going into a trance. Trance-like experiences are great when they happen. God produces them, and they can be things that motivate and move us forward. But they're not the everyday experience. Our everyday experience is learning to be perceiving the presence of God and where we are in our spirit, and just going with that flow. And a lot of what you do, engage in the spirit, isn't actually something that you're cognitively aware of, but you cognitively have it released to you when you need it. And I find that all the time. I'm saying things that I don't know. Well, when did I know it in my spirit before I knew it in my mind? In some encounter that I've had in heaven, or my spirit just being there and actively engaging in the revelation of heaven and releasing it, and then I find myself saying something that I didn't know cognitively, but my spirit obviously knew it, otherwise I wouldn't be able to say it. So it is a process where we don't get hung up or try really hard to see. And I think this is one of the biggest issues around. And I know Ian Clayton says, well, if you can't see it, you can't have it. But he's actually not, the word does not mean that you have to have a visual, full-blown image of it. It means you have to have a spiritual perception which gives you revelation that sets the desires of your heart towards it that you want it. That's really what the word see, I perceive, not just that I have a visual thing. And I've actually found that a lot of people who are visual, who call themselves seers, actually are quite hindered in this process, in that they have amazing things, but they're so symbolic that they don't know what they mean. Then they need someone else to try and interpret them, and that's not the ideal. I'd rather have, someone said a picture paints 1,000 words, but it also produces 1,000 questions. And I'd rather actually be aware of what my spirit was doing, but in communication with God, where I am able to have his thoughts converse with me in my mind, in my reason center, because most of my engagements when I'm looking for revelation come within the reason center of my soul. I'm looking for his thoughts and my thoughts to engage in conversation so that I can have a, hey, God is telling me this and showing me that. You know, rather than I'm going to have this wonderful vision that then I'm going to have to try and figure out what it all means. You know, and I'm not knocking the visions. I have them, and you know, I have had the trances, and I've been in heaven in that way. But now I've learned to be there and here, and that means you have to be able to function here and be there, and they're flowing one for the other. You know, and yes, your spirit can engage there, and your spirit can be doing something in the realm of heaven that you're not necessarily aware of at the time. You know, every night I give God my spirit and say, hey, use me tonight for whatever you want to do, and then I go to sleep. You know, and sometimes I remember things later, and sometimes I don't. And sometimes people tell me of some of the things that they saw me doing, which I find quite interesting. You know, but sometimes you're aware. Like yesterday morning, I was in our worship. It was quite an intense opening. Heaven was open. You know, I stepped into the four faces of God, and I'm there. Just sort of like, sometimes I go there and I'm very clear what it's that I'm doing, and I was just there, and I'm just like, oh, I'm just hanging out in the presence of God, standing in Him, and I felt myself say, hey, I'm standing here, carrying the power of your attorney to do whatever I'm authorized to do. And immediately I found myself in 1824 outside this house. Now I just knew where it was, and it was like I'm standing outside this house, and I go and knock on the door. I open the door, or the person opens the door, and they're almost like waiting for me. It felt like an expectation. So I go in, I see this room, and there's this baby there, and a mother who'd just given birth and died. And I'm standing in this situation, and I'm feeling really bold. And so I rebuke the spirit of death, and it's like I pulled the person's spirit out of heaven and brought it back into their body, and they just gasped and opened their eyes. And then I prophesied over them that they were going to have another child that was going to be used to change the course of history. And then I said goodbye, and I walked out, and I found myself back, you know, where I was before. You know, and it was like, okay, you know, did I, you know, and people ask questions like this, you know, and I know I was being used to answer the cry of that family for the mother in 1824 in this house, and God used me because I was available to go back into that and answer, because no one else was available to do that at that time. Now, I was always used. I just became aware of it because I engaged eternity now on that day. God always used me to answer that prayer, so I didn't change history. I just was always been used in history. I stepped into that realm where God could take me that day and take me back to answer that prayer in 1824. And that's the sort of thing that we can do when we begin to just step into that realm. You know, now that was a very much, hey, I'm not aware of where I am anymore, and I'm operating in that. But most of the time, it's much more sort of not like that. Just, hey, I'm fully aware of what's going on, but I'm not really trying to picture it or see it. I'm just knowing what I'm doing, where I am in the spirit. And, you know, and that's, I can describe it to you in visual terms, but most of the time I don't like to do that. I find some of the activation things that are out there are very, very directive. You need to go through this archway, and then you need to take the third arch, and I've never seen any of that. You know, I'm not even bothered. Most of the time I just want to fix my eyes on Jesus. I'm not really bothered by whether there's an archway or 3 doors up to the left, unless he walks me up there and takes me through it. Because I really don't need to tell someone, you have to go through this, out through this door, up this corridor, go left to get to somewhere. I just want to say, hey, let's let Jesus take us by the hand and take us where he wants us to go. And if that becomes a pathway that then you find that you can walk, great. It becomes your pathway, but I encourage you, don't try and make your pathway someone else's pathway, or try and make someone else's pathway yours. Develop your own. And whether it becomes something you're very visually aware of or not does not change the validity of your encounter and your experience with God. At the end of the day, the fruit comes as it's outworked on earth as it is in heaven, not just because I had a wonderful spiritual experience, which was amazing, but really didn't produce any fruit. So be yourself, and engage that. I was thinking the other day, and I had a conversation with a couple of people, and it was talking about exploring. And in fact, it was actually with someone who was in Ian Clayton's home group, and they described Ian as an explorer. And I thought, yeah, that's probably a really good description. He's exploring things that no one else has been, and once that's opened up, people can go behind. And and I actually felt, do I want to be an explorer? And I felt, no, I'm not an explorer. I'm a pioneer. I want to go to places, and I want to establish something that remains in that place, not just find out about them. Now, some people may be called to be explorers, and they just say, hey, I've been to these places and now they're available for you to go. But I want to go to a place and I want to leave something there which can be used, and people can occupy and people can move. So there are differences of roles and differences that we have. Find out who you are, how it works with you, your own personal destiny and redemptive gift, and then be yourself, be comfortable. Don't try and be anybody else or try and do it like anybody else. Just find what works for you, and it will be just as valid and real as anyone else's experiences. You can't get whacked in the spirit all the time to engage heaven. If you want to live an anyway sort of normal sort of life, you use our testimony to open a door and to step back through. And you can use your imagination to do that, which is visual or not. Your imagination does not have to be a visual thing. It can just be an engaging thing. I'm choosing to engage in something that I've done before, and I'm thinking about that to step back through it. That's using my imagination to go through the doorway. If I close my eyes and picture the doorway, great, I can do that. But I've got to be careful then I don't try and make up what's going to go on the other side of the door. I just have to experience it, whatever it is. So I don't know whether if that actually answered the question that you asked in the first place, but hopefully it's all right. Okay. Anyone else got anything they want to share or ask?
Thanks, Mike. No, that's okay.
Okay.
Mike, I have a slightly random question. When I was at, I think it was the conference in Wales, I think, around about that time anyway, I heard the audible voice of God give me the name of a person who is part of Jewish history. I don't know if you're aware of the story of Judith, which is actually in the Apocrypha,
yeah,
as far as the Protestants are concerned. I just wondered if you had any information, knowledge. I mean, I read the story in the Apocrypha and I've looked her up online and stuff, but I just wondered if you had any knowledge of that personage. I mean, in the information it says that she's a fictional character, but she was used to model courage and women of valor in the Jewish tradition. So I just wondered if you'd ever come across her as part of your experiences exploring the heavenly realms.
No, never come across her. I think in something like that, it's then would be to say, okay, God, can you give me a bit more of a clue here? And then go back to him and actually ask, is this a person I'm supposed to meet, or actually are you wanting? You've got my interest. I found out this is about courage, whatever. Are you basically saying to me, I'm going to need to operate with some courage and stuff soon? I mean, it can God works in mysterious ways. I mean, you just can't put him in a box or try and make him do something in a way that makes sense to us. You know, he will have a reason for how he's communicated that to you, which is beyond my understanding. Now, I could say, well, you know, God, well, it makes sense. If you wanted to say something to her, why don't you just tell her?
Yeah.
You know, but actually the journey and the process may be actually something to do with why he does it in that way. And in all these things, you know, is there an angel called Judith? That may well be. You know, it's like there are angels, there are trillions of angels, and they've all got to have names, and God named them all individually. So I'm sure there's one out there called Judith, you know, or maybe even a group of them, a class of angels, which are Judith angels.
Yeah.
You know, that there are a lot of angels that operate in classes that we get the name of the class, but not necessarily their personal identity, like the seraphim. Well, every seraphim has got a personal individual name as well as, hey, I'm a seraphim. You know, and some of them have, you know, specific names that we know of, but they're of a class of angels, an angelic realm. So, you know, the key is to go, you know, for me, in that sort of thing, okay, God, what are you trying to show me? You know, if there's an angel, you know, or that class, am I supposed to operate with that class of angels, and what for? Yeah, am I supposed to therefore begin to administrate where courage is going to be released in particular situations or circumstances? You know, that's, again, you know, it's developing our relationship with God in which we begin to discern and tune in to his heart and begin to understand him a little bit more. You know, and you know, there are things like that. I mean, I you know, whenever I engage Enoch, it's like that, really cryptic and weird, like, you know, sending me on quests to do stuff, you know, and I'm like, well, it's almost sort of like, well, is this just, you know, he knows my liking for, you know, medieval knight stories or, you know, things like, I don't know. It's like, but that's how he, you know, how he meets with me, you know, and I always know that it's like there's something significant in it. But he doesn't tell me, right, I want you to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. He says, I'm sending you on a quest to do this. And I'm like, but what does that mean? And I'm always left with a question, what does that mean? And what I do is I meditate around what it means. And then in that meditation, the revelation of it, and every time I engage in heaven, I keep it in mind to, okay, how can I engage in this encounter which is going to give me revelation of this quest? You know, and I found that really unfolds, and then I find out, okay, oh, right. So these encounters actually were to do with that quest, because it almost gives a context for something. That's what I find. Some of those things then give me a context, and then my engagements or encounters in things then fit that context, and without the context I would have been struggling to see what the encounters, how they related to one another or what meaning they had, but that gave it, and I find that my spirit just knows. It's almost like, ah, yeah, you know. So yeah, that's in these things, I think, go back and find out and pursue it, and it'll unveil. And you know, because God doesn't want to be cryptic for the, you know, for just because of the sake of it. Sometimes it's because, you know, is it a parable or is it an analogy? Am I supposed to get one point out of this counter, or actually is there something that I need to pursue and it will become something which unveils in my journey and something else? So yeah.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Yes, I just wanted to ask. It's been about 2 weeks now since I left my church.
Yeah.
And we're just praying at home. We're going through some of the, you know, the modules. Like yesterday we did First Love, just me and the children. And I'm just wondering how are we supposed to proceed? How can I possibly proceed from here?
You just have to follow the direction that God gives you. You know, one thing I would say is, you know, when you're describing what's happened, I wouldn't personalize it to become mine. because if you've left your church, it's no longer your church, and be careful that you don't have a connection to it, which will potentially be in, because if you felt that God say you need to step out and pursue, then almost like you have to sever the connections that you have in your emotions. You may have soul ties towards it, and therefore you still may be under its influence in ways that you don't just see. So I would encourage you just to look around that, and then, okay, God, what is it you want me to do? Am I authorized to establish something new? There, I'm going to seek God for a mandate. What are you authorizing me to do? Am I authorized to establish a new ecclesia? Well, if that's the case, then establish it for your own family. And then once you've established it for your family, then you can begin to get the strategy for God for drawing other people to it. You know, and once you have a blueprint, then you can start to administrate the government of that blueprint. Without a blueprint, you know, Habakkuk, it says, you know, write the vision and make it plain so that people can run with it. You have to have something that you can share in your own heart, which essentially unveils what God is releasing, and then you can call it into being. You can call people, you can release a heavenly call that draws people towards that blueprint. You have to have it to be able to administrate it. You don't have to have it necessarily in full-blown every detail, but you have to have the basic. Am I called to establish a city of refuge, ecclesia, new wineskin? If so, then what are the 7 mountains are attached to that? Or you start pursuing it. You know, and once you have the basic of what it is, then you can then begin to call for that, call things that be not as if they are. You know, start to release heaven, the angels, to go out and into the highways and byways and compel people to come in, because ultimately you want to see people get saved. You want people to come in and be part of the next generation, because that's what the Joshua generation are going to equip. You know, we don't want just masses of transfer from other places, although, you know, in the new order, people are going to be called to cross over the veil, so there are going to be a lot of people wanting to find somewhere to engage. And there are very few places out there, which I would say are clear cities of refuge type new ecclesia wineskins that people can find. So, you know, we need to start legislating. You know, when I was talking to the legislative group, God wants to release these blueprints, and there are angels, legions of angels, who carry these blueprints and are waiting for people to say, here am I, send me, to pursue them. You know, the blueprints are there, because God will establish cities of refuge in every area, you know, because otherwise there's going to be no storehouse and no harvest. So, you know, he's looking for willing people. You know, as I've said before, you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be willing to follow him, listen to him step by step, learn how to do the process, and then you will find things will start to begin to come together. You know, and everybody needs to have a clear understanding of what they're called to do. And if it's, okay, you feel, hey, I may feel called to, you know, establish something new, having been called out of the old, then, okay, well, God, what does that look like? What do you want it to be for me and for my family as the starting point for this? You know, then call for, you know, other people to come. And, you know, they're out there. There are others who are hearing the same sound of heaven, don't know where to go, don't know who to talk to. They're feeling isolated and alone, and they're just waiting for someone to send out a call to say, come, let's connect. And God will start making the connections in the kingdom that will open up those relationships, and then you'll find things will start to develop and pursue from there. You know, and if it isn't to establish something yourself, then it's to connect with something else that God wants to be established under the new order.
Mm.
You know, and you have to hear clearly for yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, what that is. You know,
Yeah.
but if you're pursuing Him, He'll show you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. All right.
Hi, Mike.
Oh yeah, David, all right.
Yes, thank you. I've got a specific question really relating to feeling the spirit in our body when we're engaging with heaven. I've noticed a number of times I feel myself stepping in, I really feel God's presence opening up, and I can feel the move of God's, I can feel like in the back of my neck and in this section a whole sort of movement up. I can feel something sort of got my spirit, and then sometimes I just feel like it's like a cork in a bottle, and it just sort of hits sort of the top of my head here, and the sort of boom, it's like I hit my head on the ceiling, and I've been sort of experimenting, if that's the right word, but sort of engaging with that a little bit and just trying to find out what's happening there. Sometimes it's when I'm really quite intense and, you know, I can feel my head sort of moving and I'm really seeing a tunnel and things opening up. I can really feel myself going quite deep, and it's a sort of there. It doesn't feel negative, but I just was wondering what your thoughts on that. I've been thinking, you know, reading some stuff about the dividing the soul and the spirit, and just any insights on that would be helpful on a practical sort of level.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, our spirit is connected to our nervous system and does sit in that envelope over our brain and down our spinal column. And one of the functions of the pineal gland is an opening of engagement spiritually. So there is a connection there with that area of our brain and things. And so when I have engagements, often when they're pretty intense at worship, then my body does have sensations that I've become used to and discerning, if you like. When it comes to, okay, I seem to be hitting a ceiling, I would say that is the soul. You know, where the soul and the spirit are engaging, there's a level in which your soul is not comfortable in going beyond. And so it's an indication that, hey, yes, there may well need to be a separation in this area and a reintegration. You know, really, the separation is only to separate the negative, self-centered connections the soul has to the spirit that enables it to engage the world around it. It's not that we want to be divided, soul and spirit. We actually want our spirit to be integrated with our soul, so that our spirit encompasses our soul and they all work together in a seamless, it's just me kind of way. And sometimes these type of things are an indication that, hey, there's something in the soul which is not comfortable with this level where I'm going. And that sometimes can be because there may be illegitimate spiritual experience in your family line, which the familiars type things attach to, and therefore they try and hinder or block. Those things can often be sat outside of our spirit gates to hinder the spirit engaging the soul. And sometimes, you know, our family line have used, you know, illegitimate practices that come in through the wrong gate or use the wrong door. Jesus said that, you know, he's the door, but people try and get in another way. And sometimes that can have a hindrance to when you engage in real true spiritual encounter. It hits that sort of, hey, you're not getting beyond this. But, you know, using the court system is what I would tend to do and find out, okay, if there's an accusation here which gives legitimate right to hinder and block, what is it? What is this ceiling that I'm hitting against? You know, is this something in my soul which is a hindrance to my spirit and soul working together in harmony, and this creates a disharmony that seems to bring me up in an abrupt halt, if you like. But there's certainly nothing wrong in having those sensations where our spirit resides within our physical body, and become very sensitive to the sensations that our body communicates. You know, our body is an amplifier of frequency and vibrations in the atmosphere, and it's sensitive to it. We've just never really learnt to interpret the vibrations, because all the nervous system does picks up those little disturbances or vibration frequency patterns in the spiritual realms and the realms around us, and we learn to interpret what they are. You know, and we do that sometimes by feelings and senses. You know, William Branham, who operated with an angel, was able to determine vibrational frequency that indicated what sicknesses people were had. So they had a low frequency vibration in certain areas of their body. He was able to pick that up, discern, and interpret that as a particular disease that then he was able to speak into and speak healing and wholeness into. That's one where the body, through his hand, was able to, you know, determine frequency changes in people. So certainly our body and soul, spirit should work together, cooperating in the whole area. You know, I know people. I'm not sure with the whole pineal gland thing. I know it's an area of the brain which seems to be connected to imagination or an opening of a spiritual dimension. I've never really bothered that with myself because it just happened. So, you know, I just engage. I don't sort of try and find a particular connection. I know people do, and people have talked about it. It's never something I really needed to do. You know, I really just engaged in desire, which opened up the doors. But it's not to say that that isn't correct and that that's what is happening. I'm just not using that as a doorway. My doorway comes within my spirit rather than in my body. But I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I'm just saying it's not. I've got not a personal testimony of using that. Anyway. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Mike, I think my question is not relevant based on what you just said.
Yeah.
You mentioned William Branham a while ago and the vibration he has in his arm, and I've been looking at William Branham myself because probably the last 2 years I've been having all different kinds of sensation in my left arm. In fact, I describe it as I have a relationship with my arm. I don't always understand what it means or, you know, what is being said to me. But I'll share with you 2 experiences I've had recently that, well, one in particular, I felt like the sensations just became extreme, if that makes sense. I went to bed one night after writing something. I want to share that I wrote something before that I was led to write. And while I was doing that, the presence of God was just unbelievable. So I went to bed with this just awesome, you know, tangible presence. And when I went to sleep, I saw myself walking through like a house. It could be a church building or something like that. And I was speaking to the Lord within myself. And I said to the Lord, you know, I really need to speak to my family about closing the gate because we no longer share the gate with our neighbor, and we have our own gate now. So I need to remind them to close the gate. And I heard an audible voice behind me say, "Yes, close the gate." So I turned around to look to see who was behind me, and I saw nothing. My spirit clearly knew this was an angel, because then my spirit then said, "You know, Lord, it would be easier if the angels would just speak to me rather than me having to try and figure out what to say to them." I was already on this journey with the Lord where the Lord was just really showing me that I was actually fearful of anything that sound spirit, like cloud of witness, spirit, anything like that. So I felt the Lord was dealing with me on that. But in the dream, I said, it would be easier if the angels just came to me and said something. Then I could say to them, "Who are you?" The minute I said that, I heard the same audible voice behind me say, "Who are you?" I then turned around, and there was a woman behind me about 8 feet tall. And she had a long skirt on. She had on a top with, you know, a cut. Well, I didn't realize my camera is off. So she had a top on that had a cut right here. Beautiful woman, stunning. And she had light coming out of her chest. As soon as I saw her, let's just say, after how many other experiences with other angels where I either closed the door on or pushed or kicked or, I recognized her right away as an angel. And I opened my arms to her to give her a hug. And as I opened my arms to her, she started to walk towards me. And as she started to walk towards me, the light from her chest went into my eyes, and I was slain in the spirit. Next time I came to us, I woke up. So I woke up, and not very long after that, by the way, I woke up. And when I woke up, I could still hear her voice. You can't miss her voice. Very raspy, very clear. And she's a black woman, by the way. Black woman, about 8 feet tall, with, I can't remember her hair and everything. But has a raspy voice, sounds like she'd be an awesome alto, that's just a great voice. And I heard the voice repeatedly said, "Who are you?" Even though I was now awake. But I could hear the voice coming from the inside of me. I was lying, and the sensations, of course, the vibrations had just increased immensely now. In particular in the arm, but just like I call it Holy Ghost tingles right throughout the body. And I then said, in fact, she's asking me who am I? I'm just going to ask her the question. So I said, "Who are you?" And I heard Addison. I didn't know what that meant, but the Lord had told the piece I wrote before I went to bed had to do with a word he gave me. He said he is releasing new functions, new roles, and new realms at this time. And I wrote a whole piece on that. So what I understood, usually everything I do is prophetically. So I do it before and then he kind of explains after, if that makes sense. So it just felt to me, so what I perceived was the Lord was saying to me, you get her name, you'll get her function, her realm, and her role. So I just, etched that in my mind and said, okay, tomorrow I'll check and see what Addison means. But throughout the night, I felt like I just felt so many different sensations throughout my body. I don't think I slept from I woke up that time. The sensations throughout my body was just amazing in terms of vibrations and stuff. And since then, my arm would even go numb. Not numb as in, where I can't feel it. If I touch it, I can still feel it. But then I would have sensation so strong going up in my arm, the left arm in particular. What was I going to say now? So yes, I looked up the name Allison. Allison means the meaning of it is truthful, and the spiritual connotation is holiness.
Yeah.
What I felt in my spirit was that the Lord was saying that as it was with Jacob when he was wrestling with the angel, and he did not let go of the angel until that angel I don't know what the word is right now, impart him his very self, as it were, nature, that's the word. I felt like that's what this woman did. This angel did. I felt like she imparted her nature. As I said, one of my reasons for looking at William Branham is because, one, I've always been drawn to him. I was actually having a conversation with the Lord one night, talking to him about different things, and he said to me, who am I drawn to who has been dead? And I said, I'm drawn to William Branham. And he said, go and study him out. And he said, who am I drawn to who is dead, but in the Bible, that like Bible characters? And I said, John. And I said Daniel. I said that because it's probably the two books I've studied out the most. Now, having studied out all three of these people, I can see the connection between myself and all three. William Branham, like I said, has the same hand thing. This is the first time I'd ever heard it. When I read it, I started crying because I didn't even know there was. I just thought this was really strange what was happening to me, and I didn't know what was going on. When I lay hands on people, I generally use my left hand now because of just the amount of sensations that are in there. I just think if I can release it, then it won't get numb, you know. So yeah, and I can see the connection with Daniel. The Lord actually told me about Daniel. He said I was a Daniel, but I didn't understand what that meant. I now see the connection with Daniel and John in that they're both apocalyptic writers, which I believe that is one of the things that he's called me to do. I shared all that to say help, because in a way I feel that I need to be, since that day, I don't feel like I have really partnered with this angel, but I feel like this angel is a new angel that has been given to me, and it's quite significant to me, but I don't feel like I know practically how to engage with angels. I don't think I'm afraid anymore, and that's good. I think not last Saturday, but Saturday before, I was again sitting in the living room. It was another experience, and I can't remember what I said to the Lord. I was watching William Branham. I was actually watching William Branham on YouTube again. I have a book on him, so I had read that previously regarding that arm, but now I just decided, let me watch him. So I'm watching him, and I said to the Lord, this is the same gift, I believe, because I don't know how I know all these diseases. I'm not even scientifically inclined. How do I know these illnesses? How can I describe it to people? And they say, yeah, that's what I have. You know what I mean? So I said to the Lord, I think this is the same gift you've given me. I just feel like I'm scared, and he's not. I'm scared to actually step out more and more into this. Sure. And instantly, in my peripheral, I saw something white in my room. I turned to the side, and I didn't see anything. So I said, I just knew in my spirit that this was an angel standing there. So I said, who are you? And I heard Luke. Not audibly, but in my spirit, I heard Luke. So I then saw something luminous, like over the head of this thing, just appeared out of nowhere. It's like literally something luminous appeared out of anywhere. That's how it looked. I then looked up Luke. Guess what Luke means? It means luminous. And that was bizarre. And the scripture that came with the name Luke had to do with spiritual gifts, and that pretty much I'm giving you spiritual gifts, and I can't remember the scripture now. It's Isaiah 40. Yeah. But you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you've moved from where you were in terms of fear. So now you're having experience and encountering that. Just continue the path. God is obviously leading. Your desire of your heart has changed so that you're open to that. In terms of the William Branham thing and that gift, I think the connection between that and the angel is to ensure that that gift remains pure. Because a gift like that can be used in an impure way, and I think the angel, in terms of truthful and holiness, is to ground you in the reality of this is a gift that God has given, this is God's blessing to you and through you, just to keep you grounded in that. But in all these things, you just continue to go back into re-engaging with God around it. What we don't want to do is take our focus off God and just focus on the angelic, so that becomes, hey, I want to see these angels, but they're in context of God has sent them. They're messengers, ministering spirits. If they've got a message, what's the message? I also have, in my right arm, sensations, particularly when there's a particular angel around, a breakthrough angel that wants to use me in a particular way, and I sense that the arm becomes very heavy, and it's really hard even to lift it up because it contains something that you have to give away. So I understand you want to impart it or release it so that it's released from you to fulfill its purpose. But the question is, who are you? And I would meditate around that, because is there a revelation of your identity and your eternal destiny that God wants to give you in an increased measure? And that's why he's asking the question, who are you in relation to eternity? Not, well, I'm Christine, and well, it's like, no, who are you? What is your true identity as a son of God? What is your function? Because in terms of, as you said, a name can indicate a function and a role. So what God may well be saying to you, what is your function and what is your role? And opening up a realm for you to see that may well be about to change or increase or shift into something new. But don't get too sort of stressed over it, or it's almost like, okay, no, I'm having these encounters, I'm going to go with the flow of them, and I'm just going to pick out that which is important. So the important things are, the who are you, the fact of, the truthful and holiness, and the fact that these encounters are preparing you for something. And that's what to focus on. What is this preparation for? What's coming? Is a new season coming? Are new opportunities coming? Is new avenues being opened? And therefore, this is a preparation time. As you see in the Word many times, encounters like with Jacob and the angel, that wrestling, so that there was an impartation of blessing and identity. Because after, there was a change of name. He went from Jacob to Israel. And in the whole issue of apocalyptical stuff, be careful you don't get caught up in the doom and gloom stuff of it. Quite often it can be potentially where that can come over in a negative way. Because at the end of William Branham's life, he went off into some weird stuff because he didn't stick to who he was. See, God gave him that ministry. He wasn't a teacher. He was actually a minister of miracles and an imparter of that. Actually, he tried to become a teacher, and he started to try and teach outside of what God had called him to do. And the reality was he went off into some weird stuff. So, again, when you engage with the men in white linen, their negative aspects of the things that they did can also be helpful in engaging. It's not just, we've engaged with many of them who are involved in administration of the kingdom in various aspects, and they give you insight into, hey, here's a large area that you want to avoid, or learn from me, because when I engaged this, I made this mistake, and it took me off into this. And you find that many of those guys who had huge revelatory engagements to bring those miracle workers ended up going somewhere with it which wasn't grounded because of the lack of accountability that was around their life. Because just because there are miracles doesn't mean everything's right. And a lot of people will sort of look at, wow, that person, and take everything that person says as being absolutely right just because they do miracles. Miracles are signs that point to God, not to our own validity, to validate our own identity. So again, the who are you, just be really clear to pursue that, in that I think it will bring you a grounding which isn't to do with what you do, because you are not what you do. You do because of who you are, and that is a really important thing. Our identity releases our destiny, not the other way round. You know, it's not our destiny releases our identity. It's like, no, we are called by God. This is who we are. And as an outworking of who I am, I'm able to outwork these things that have been prepared for me. You know, but keep at it. You know, keep going with it, and you know, keep journaling it and going back to God with it, and you'll find, you know, revelation will be released, and you'll get a more clarity of it. You know, but no, it's good. Okay. Anyone else?
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, got time for a few more minutes. If anyone's got anything they want to share or ask.
Yeah, hi Mike.
Okay, hiya.
Yeah, sorry I came late, yeah, I just want to share this, I've just been trying to, not trying, I've been, engaging, going to engaging court. So, and I went, last week, and so I asked, for the accusation and everything. I took myself really, and to my amazement, clearly I just I saw, Satan. He came into the court, but after all that, he just looked. His hands were down, and he looked so defeated with his head down like that, and he was walking away from where I was, just backing me and walk off. And I saw his back, and he got a slash on his gown, at the back. So yeah, I saw it so vividly, and I kept at, with the protocol and everything. And in the end, I got the verdict, and I declared that. So I could sense that, what I went with, was I was vindicated, and things just like shift in the atmosphere. So, and it put me straight into another dimension that, I could tell that all those stuff are gone. So that was just my experience. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome, excellent. Yeah, and it's great to hear testimonies of things where things shift and things change as a result of us operating legislatively and dealing with things in the courts. And a lot of things with the enemy, it's the perception that we have that gives him authority. And once you see him as defeated, and you see, hey, then Jesus described him as being under our feet.
Yes.
Then that's how we need to perceive him. Actually, he is under our feet. We have authority on the basis of the defeat that's already been taking place. Jesus made an open, triumphal possession of the enemy, as a result of what happened on the cross. We just need to use that authority and to continue to administrate it and remind him of his place. I always like the Smith Wigglesworth story when the devil turned up at the end of his bed while he was asleep, and he woke up and he was just like, oh, it's you again, and went back to sleep, because he knew that the enemy had no access to him and no right, and he wasn't going to be intimidated. And actually, by ignoring him, it was the biggest put down. He didn't need to say, I rebuke you, Satan, or the Lord rebuke you, or he just ignored him because he knew, hey, you have nothing in me to operate in. So yeah, it's a good testimony. Keep going with that, and when you do have a court order or a court verdict, use it, administrate it, make sure you operate in accordance to it, and outwork it. And every time the enemy would try and you have a picture to use, you have that image,
yeah,
which is like, you are defeated and you're walking away from me,
yeah,
because you have nothing to do in me. So, use that. Remind him if you need to at times, or just remind yourself. It's just a reminder. Hey, I have authority over all the works of the evil one, and he shall no way harm me, which is what Jesus said.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Okay, you're welcome. It's good. Very good. All right. Anybody else before we go? Nope. Okay. All right. Okay. Well.